Welcome back, Brooklyn Nets fans. It is over. The 2021/2022 Brooklyn Nets are out in the first round via a sweep from the Boston Celtics, who they beat in 5 games last year. Shows you how much difference a year can make. But anyway, disappointing. I didn't really expect to win tonight, although the Nets were favored somehow. I still don't get why they were favored in any of these home games because the Celtics were outplaying them by what seemed like a lot. The final scores weren't that bad, but it just seemed like the Celtics always outplayed us. Anyway, we're going to talk about tonight's game. We'll talk about the Nets going forward. Some Ben Simmons stuff came out that's not too exciting or encouraging as a Nets fan. But anyway, hopefully you guys enjoy the video. Leave a like, always helps out. And let's get into it. So the final score tonight was 116-112 Boston. And it just felt like, this game felt like the rest of the series, if that makes any sense. A game where the Nets looked very flat at times, offensively, defensively especially, just so many bad rotations, leaving guys open, second chance points, the usual Nets stuff on defense. But the frustrating part was the Nets would go on these little runs of 6-0 run, 7-0 run, or something along those lines, and they cut it to 4, 3, 5, and the Celtics always, and I mean always, responded with a Grant Williams three-pointer. Jason Tatum would do a step-back three, or Al Horford corner three. Every time the Nets made a run, and you're thinking, all right, we're coming back. They finally cut it to a single possession, or down by 4, down by 5. The Celtics had every single answer, and credit to them, of course. I hate to sit here and give Boston a lot of credit, but they outplayed the Nets the entire series. The Nets tried to get by just on talent. That was not enough. Boston is a much better coached team. Boston's stars, if you want to call Jaylen Brown a star, go ahead. But Brown and Tatum specifically outplayed Durant and Kyrie throughout the entire series. So, coming into this series, people kept saying, oh, Boston has more continuity and all that. They're playing much better defense, as we know. They're better coached. But the Nets have Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. But those guys really only showed up twice total. Kyrie in game 1 and Kevin Durant here in game 4. That's 2 out of 8 opportunities, basically, where those guys showed up. So it just wasn't enough, and we did not get a game where Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving went off at the same time. We still, as Nets fans, have not seen that this year, which is crazy. Those two just cannot go off in the same game. And, people had that, when they talked about this series, the interpretation was, well, in order for the Nets to win, Kyrie and KD just have to go off, is what people would say. And that wasn't necessarily true. You look at the margin of defeat in this series. The Nets lost by less than 7 points every game this series. This was a close series. Yes, it's a sweep. I get all that. All that matters is the final result. A loss is a loss. You lose 4 games in a row, you got swept. It doesn't matter if you lost by 25 plus every game or you lost by less than 7. But what I'm saying is this was a close series regardless of Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant not playing well together for 2 games and individually for game 1 and game 4. So despite those guys not playing well together, they still put up a fight, which I guess kind of leaves me encouraged as a Nets fan. It's tough to see the bright light here in any sort of situation coming off a sweep in a season where you were coming in as finals favorites. But still, to at least make this series this close and the Nets to have I think, a very bad coach in Steve Nash who really gives them no advantage. That's something to look forward to. And I tweeted before this game even started today, call me a bad fan for it, maybe you can say that, but I really said I don't care about the outcome of the game. I just wanted to see KD play very well. And we got that. We got a Kevin Durant. He was 13 of 31, not very efficient, but still dropped 39. He had 7 rebounds, 9 assists. He had some very nice passes in this game. Yes, had some bad turnovers. He had a couple in the first quarter. He had the one brutal turnover, which was a situation where the Nets were trying to make a comeback sometime in the second quarter, and KD basically got caught in the air and threw a pass to Jason Tatum, who intercepted it. And then I think the Celtics went down and made a three-pointer probably, because that's pretty much what happened every time the Nets made a run in this game. So, Kevin Durant, for the most part, though, he played well. Were there some moments of questionable effort on his part, especially that last play? Yes, but at the same time, it's tough. When you're down 3-0, it's tough to have heart every single possession. The guy played 47 minutes. I know some people are criticizing KD for that final defensive possession, but I mean, it is what it is. They were not coming back in this series. It would have been great to take one. I mean, I found myself watching that game in the final 2 minutes, really wanting to win because you're already there and it's a 1 point game and so many big plays were happening. But it just wasn't meant to be. So it's a shame. Kyrie Irving played 45 minutes. He played a good amount himself, only 13 shots. And with Kyrie, he did what he had to do in game one, came out and scored 39 points. He was making ridiculous shots and was playing with like this amazing energy level and just really wanted to stick it to the Boston crowd. But it felt like in the remaining games of this series, the final 3 games, that Kyrie just was kind of passive in a way. He had some games he wasn't shooting that well, but I just feel like Kyrie could have done more. And I talked about this last video after the Game 3 reaction, was that Kyrie's the only net that could penetrate against this great Boston defense, and we still didn't see enough of Kyrie penetrating against this Boston defense. There were times he would have like Daniel Tice isolated on the left side by himself, and Kyrie was taking forever to make a move. It's like, just go by him. Like, what are you waiting for? So people have said like Kyrie's quitting or he quit on the Nets this series. I don't see it that way whatsoever, but I get the whole Ramadan thing, no energy. I think Jaylen Brown goes through the same thing, so I don't want to make that excuse. But at the same time, it just felt like Kyrie was just kind of not out of it, but just too passive at times. Like, I really wanted him to try and take these games over. We saw how much attention was put on Kevin Durant by the Celtics coaching staff in this series, and you just felt like Kyrie Irving had some one-on-one matchups. Yes, they were tough against Marcus Smart and Jason Tatum at times, but it's Kyrie Irving. Like, we know he can go by anybody, and it just felt like at times he just didn't really... Once again, I don't want to say he didn't want it, but like it just felt like he was passive once again. So I was kind of disappointed by that. But he scored 20 tonight. He had 5 rebounds. He had 5 assists. He only had 2 turnovers, which is fine. Seth Curry was 9 of 13, 5 of 9 from 3, 23 points. I love what I saw out of him tonight. He got in very, very quick foul trouble, though. The first literally 5 minutes of the game, he had 3 fouls, so that's not what you want to see. Bruce Brown really did not play much in the second half at all. He was pretty much a non-factor in this game, unfortunately. Blake Griffin, I want to talk about. This is another thing with Steve Nash, how he does not play Blake Griffin until the final 2 minutes of the third quarter in Game 3 when you're down 0-2 already. And I get, like, Drummond was supposed to get the first crack at it because he's been playing more and he's had a better season overall. But I think as Nets fans, we knew pretty early on that this was not an Andre Drummond series. Like, Andre Drummond is great in specific games versus specific teams, but the Boston Celtics were not one of them. If the Nets hypothetically matched up with the Milwaukee Bucks in the first round and not the Boston Celtics, that's an Andre Drummond series. He'd be a great fit against the Milwaukee Bucks. But in this particular matchup against the Boston team, where basically everybody on the floor is really good at moving around, even Al Horford in his old age, he can move around. This was not a good series for Andre Drummond whatsoever. And we saw Drummond start the game and then pretty much did not play after it. I mean, he played 4 minutes in this game only, and I kind of said that to myself too. When Drummond left in the first quarter, I said to myself, we might not see this guy the rest of this game, even the rest of the series, honestly. So then they turned to Blake Griffin, who I think started in the start of the second quarter, I'm pretty sure, and Blake did not score, but he definitely made an impact. I mean, he was taking charges. He helped get Jason Tatum fouled out of this game with about 3-4 minutes left, which definitely helps. And Blake was a plus 10. Not many guys were a plus. The only plus on this team was Blake, and then Goran Dragic was a plus 6. So, Blake was doing a lot defensively. I mean, yes, I know Blake's not like a first-team all-defense type guy, but the amount of effort he gives, he had some tough rebounds at times as well. I love what I saw out of Blake, and honestly, I would love to have him back next year. I know he's like 32, 33 now, but I just love watching that guy play. The energy he plays with, like, we need that, and I would love to have him back next year. I'm sure if Steve Nash returns, I don't think Blake Griffin comes back, but maybe if the Nets get a new head coach and he wants to give Blake Griffin more of a role, then maybe Blake Griffin's back next year, but I would like to see him back. Nick Claxton, just, like... You look at one part of the one aspect of Nick Claxton's game, which was horrendous tonight, and that's the free throw shooting. But outside of that, Nick Claxton, I have to say, was phenomenal out there. He really was. Like, Nick Claxton was 6 of 6. He had 6 rebounds. He had 2 steals. He had 3 blocks. Everything was great out of Nick Claxton. Then you look at the free throw shooting, and my goodness, this was bad. 1 of 11 from the free throw line. Ime Udoka at one point brought in Peyton Pritchard just to purposely foul Claxton and put him on the line. I think he went 1 of 2 at that point. He made his one and only free throw at that moment. But that was very ugly, and he broke the record for most free throws missed in a row, I think, to start out a game in the playoffs, which was held by Shaquille O'Neal. I think he missed like 7 or 8 in a row, and Nick Claxton broke that record. So not a good record to hold there if you're Nick Claxton. But in all seriousness, though, Nick Claxton's got to be back next year. I know he's had a very up and down Nets career for the most part. I think he's been here for 3 years now. So Claxton, when he's healthy, definitely helps this team. Definitely. Like, he's probably our best center. I mean, I got to say. So he is a guy who's had some injury history, some health history. He had that weird illness going on the first part of this year. But Nick Claxton's a guy this team needs going forward. And when you have a guy who's 6'10", 6'11", and can play the perimeter defense that he plays, you shouldn't lose that. You should keep that, and the Nets should look to get Nick Claxton back next year. And people are saying on Twitter he's losing millions of dollars based on this performance, and there might be some truth to that. I think his contract may take a hit because of the free throw shooting. If Nick Claxton hypothetically went 10 of 11 at the line tonight and was a big part of this Nets, it would have been a win if he went 10 of 11. Then I'm sure Nick Claxton would have got paid a bit more. So to see him miss all those free throws in a pretty crucial game for in a contract year is not what you want to see from his perspective. Goran Dragic, I feel like he played more in this game because Seth Curry got in quick foul trouble. So Dragic played 24 minutes. He was 4 of 6, 2 of 4 from downtown. He made that bank three-pointer from straight on, which was a big shot in the fourth quarter. He had 8 rebounds, 4 assists. He's a guy that said after the game he wants to play for 2 or 3 more years. Now, we do know that the main reason Goran Dragic came to the Nets after he was bought out by who? The Spurs, I think it was? Yeah, the Spurs. Was that Steve Nash was the head coach of this team. We know that they were former teammates back when they were with the Phoenix Suns. So in the event that Steve Nash is not here next year, does Goran Dragic still want to remain with the Brooklyn Nets? That's a wait and see. I would like to have him back, but we could run into a situation like Paul Millsap where the guy just completely falls off a cliff and is washed. So you have to watch out for that. He's going to be 36 next year, I believe. So that's the one thing. They have to watch out for that, and I don't know. I don't know how they're going to determine that or not, but if they want to go younger at the backup point guard position, I get it, but I was a fan of what I saw from Goran, especially in the playoffs. He was really good in the playoffs. Patty Mills, 19 minutes, 2 of 6, 1 of 4 from downtown. He really didn't do much in this game, unfortunately. Patty Mills, I thought, had a decent series. It really wasn't that bad. Like, he was so bad the second half of the regular season, but Patty Mills, I feel like, did not kill us. He actually helped us in game 3. Unfortunately, they lost every game, but still, I feel like Patty Mills wasn't that bad. We touched on everybody, though. We did not see LaMarcus Aldridge. He did not log a single minute in this series. No more Kessler Edwards, as we know. Some people are calling for Kessler Edwards. I've seen that on Twitter, too. And it's like, we saw Kessler Edwards play like 8 minutes in this series, and he just did not look prepared for it and ready for it whatsoever. I can't blame the Nets staff, coaching staff, for not playing Kessler Edwards. I would have done the same thing, so I can't blame them for that. But looking at Boston, though, Jason Tatum was amazing. I mean, just an absolute superstar, elite player. I hate saying it because, he was a Nets pick, as we know, going back to the KG and Pierce trade. Obviously, I don't think the Nets would have taken Tatum. Probably not. Knowing the Nets, they would have taken Markelle Fultz, I feel like. But still, I mean, to see Jason Tatum just turn into this superstar on a team that I despise, like the Boston Celtics, it's not what you want to see. But I do respect the man's game. He's amazing. Even Jaylen Brown, he's been playing so well recently too. So give them credit. Grant Williams was looking great hitting his shots. It's frustrating. Al Horford, of course, he looks like he's 25 years old out there. So, I mean, Boston, I think, they probably should make it out the East. I think they're favorites right now to make it out the East. Boston's kind of running into a similar situation as us last year, playing the Bucks in round 2. They do get the Bucks without Middleton for the most part. He might be out the whole series, which is obviously really fortunate for Boston. But we know that Giannis is tough to get by, so we'll see what happens there. But that should be a fun series to watch. Unfortunately, it will not be the Brooklyn Nets. Now, I wrote down some notes during this game because I figured I was going to be doing a podcast after the game was over. So let's just go through them real quick. I mean, a lot of it's like Steve Nash slander. So Seth Curry picks up 2 quick fouls in the first quarter. Steve Nash keeps him in. He picks up his third foul with 8 minutes left in the first quarter. So this annoyed me. So we see Seth Curry pick up 2 quick fouls. I thought one of those fouls was BS, by the way. I was not a fan of one of those calls. I forget exactly what happened, but it was just it just wasn't a foul in my opinion. So then Patty Mills comes in. They show Patty Mills coming in on the screen, and I'm like, all right, he's probably taking out Seth Curry. But no, he keeps in Seth Curry, and Seth Curry proceeds to get his third foul in the first 5 minutes of the game. So I'm like, all right, why bring in Patty Mills and once again just go very small? And Steve Nash had a 4-guard lineup at one point that killed the Nets in the third quarter. Not the first time he's done that, but why bring in Patty Mills when Seth Curry is already in foul trouble? He picks up his third foul because you decide to keep him in. I get it's a do or die game, I get all that, but still, it's you could have sat Seth till the end of the first quarter and at least just prevent him from picking up his third foul. So that was not very smart. I talked about the officiating in the first quarter, very questionable officiating. There was one sequence that really pissed me off. I mean, it didn't really piss me off. Once again, I really didn't care about the outcome of this game once again. I mean, I knew the series was over, but there was one sequence where a Nets player got tripped. I think it was Goran maybe got tripped, and there was no call. And then a Celtics player got tripped on literally the next possession, and they called a foul on that. And I'm like, why? Why do they get the call and we don't get a call? It's the same thing. So that kind of annoyed me. I wrote down Claxton. He was 3 for 20 in this series on free throws at one point. I don't know what he finished at, but just being 3 for 20 on free throws in the first place is horrendous. As I mentioned, he's in a contract year. Pretty unfortunate time there. The Nets went on a run in the early second quarter. Blake was on the floor. But as I wrote down, Boston always stops the momentum. Tatum hit a corner 3. That's what I wrote down. I mean, yeah, it was so annoying because at one point I stopped getting excited when the Nets went on runs because you knew Boston was going to respond every single time. It was great because the Nets were having good offensive possessions. And I thought overall the Nets played with heart tonight. They played with energy. I had a fear that Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving were just going to be like, F it, we lost anyway. But no, they actually really tried to win this game. And I give the team as a whole a lot of credit. Boston's just a better team, plain and simple. But at the same time, every time this Nets team made a run, Boston was just like, nope, we're going to stay ahead. Thanks for trying, but we're going to stay ahead. It was very annoying. Grant Williams had 2 or 3 corner threes. There was one to close out the half at the buzzer where Kyrie Irving made a terrible defensive rotation. He overhelps with one guy, leaves Grant Williams wide open in the corner. He proceeds to make a 3. So that's just, it's simple stuff like that. Kyrie in year 10, not doing a simple defensive rotation. You lose this game by 4. It came down to the wire. It's simple stuff like that. These small plays that it's only one possession, but they go a long way because, as I said, the Nets have lost these games by such a small margin throughout these 4 games in this series. I mentioned Claxton started the second half. We did not see Drummond in basically past the first quarter. Every Nets run to start the third quarter was answered by Boston. I wrote that down again. Rob Williams had an alley-oop. Tatum had a couple free throws on a Bruce Brown foul. I mentioned Bruce Brown really did not do much in this game. Did not even play that much, I feel like. How many minutes did he play, Bruce Brown? 24 minutes. All right, so he did play a decent amount, but not much in the second half. Here we go with Nash. Nash goes with a 4-guard lineup and KD as the 5 in the late third quarter. Grant Williams proceeds to body Seth Curry on an inbound play, and Boston gets a quick 2 points. I mean, yeah, I can't specifically blame Nash for that play. And I think the broadcast, it was Stan Van Gundy, said the same thing, that it was Seth Curry not really paying attention as to why that happened. But if you're Steve Nash, this pissed me off about Steve Nash in this series. Boston, and KD has said this, I believe, they're a big team. Outside of Peyton Pritchard, everyone on the Celtics is 6-4 and over. They are a big team. And it annoys me that Steve Nash refuses to play Blake Griffin at the 4. He has said that before, that Blake is a center. I'm like, no, he's been a power forward for most of his career. Why can't you just try it? And Kevin Durant can never play the 3. So, as a Nets fan, already down 2-0, 3-0 at some points in this series, I'm saying to myself, why can't we try to match size with size? Why can't we put out a lineup of KD at the 3, Seth at the 2, Kyrie at the 1, of course, but KD at the 3, then Blake at the 4, and Clax at the 5. Like, why couldn't we try that and just see if it worked? You would have enough spacing. I think people respect Blake Griffin shooting enough where you're going to create some spacing. I think Blake hit a couple threes in game 3, so I'm sure the Celtics were looking out for him shooting the ball. And Blake, I feel like, has been a decent enough three-point shooter, not this year, but the past couple years at least, decent enough to gain some respect. So I don't think the spacing would be that much of an issue, especially with Seth Curry on the floor, with KD who can shoot, Kyrie who can shoot. So I feel like a lineup like that could have worked. But of course, Steve Nash, and I don't know if it's just Nash or the entire coaching staff. I don't know if it comes down from Sean Marks. I have no idea. But they were so stubborn about playing Blake at the 4 and playing KD at the 3. They just did not want to go that route, and it was very annoying. So they decided to put KD at the 5, go with 4 guards, and it did not help them whatsoever in that late third quarter. So I asked myself this question, and I kind of want to ask you guys as well. What if the center rotation for the entire series, and this is kind of a dumb question, or it's kind of a dumb question because, once again, it's not like Drummond was going to be benched this series the entire time. Like, he was going to play in game 1 regardless. That's pretty much how he was going to get the first crack, as I said. But what if the series rotation at center had been Claxton and Blake Griffin? Like, what would be the difference in this series? I mentioned how close these losses were. Could it be 2-2 right now? I think it'd probably be 3-1 still, but like if you played Blake instead of Drummond, and Blake was so much more effective than Drummond, it could have been a different outcome. And I'm not saying we would have won the series. I think the Nets were just kind of cooked from the start. After game 1 especially, their entire confidence and spirit was brought down. So I'm not saying it would have changed like the outcome of the series. I'm still saying the Celtics would have won this in 5 or 6 games probably, but I do feel this could have been a different outcome if Blake Griffin was playing Drummond's minutes and, we played Claxton a bit more. So it is what it is. Celtics lose a challenge on the Tatum charge. Then KD. All right, so here we go. So the Nets get Tatum in foul trouble, gets his 5th foul. Blake Griffin gets a charge. Great play by him. The Celtics challenge it to kind of take that foul away from Tatum. They lose the challenge. The Nets get the ball down like 5 points. It's like the mid-4th quarter now, maybe like 8 minutes left in the 4th quarter. And they're gaining momentum. But once again, Kevin Durant puts an elbow into Marcus Smart. Marcus Smart kind of, I don't want to say flops, but definitely plays it off as much more than it actually was. And the Nets turn the ball over. So it's like, once again, every time the Celtics gave the Nets a gift, which is very rare in this series, but even when they did, they challenged the call. It was unsuccessful. The Nets just give it right back on a bad turnover and just kind of a careless play by Kevin Durant. I mentioned Dragic. He banks a 3 to make it 102-99. Then Jaylen Brown answers with an and-one jumper. He was fouled by Kyrie, I remember. He basically pulled up around the foul line, knocked down an and one. So it's just, once again, a frustrating game. I think the Nets cut it to like a 1-point game at one point, right? I'm pretty sure. I don't know. It was 109-108 Boston with 128 left. I think KD made that ridiculous shot going to his left. It was kind of like a floater. It was a really nice shot. KD had some awesome shots in this game, but yeah, after that, it was pretty much done with. So yeah, we'll never know what could have been if some rotations were different, and I hate myself for saying this, but it's true. I think James Johnson, as bad as he was at some points, he could have made a difference in this series. This was a perfect series for him. I said this to my Celtics friend the other day, and he was like, yeah, you're kind of right, actually. Like, he might have made a difference, and I'm not saying James Johnson was great at a specific thing. He wasn't really good at anything, but he was a decent enough ball handler, could have taken some of the pressure off KD. He at some points was a decent defender, at some points was a decent finisher, and he definitely would have made more of an impact than Kessler Edwards, who was not ready for the moment. So, once again, I'm not saying James Johnson would have made a big difference in this series, but maybe the Nets actually win a game if he was still here. I don't know, but just a lot of what ifs and all that, what could have been with this Brooklyn Nets team. So we'll talk more about the whole season going forward in the next week or so whenever I feel like making a video about it. We got the NFL draft coming up as a distraction, which is nice. So Ben Simmons, we got some news from, I think, Woj today, basically saying that Ben Simmons and his agent were meeting with Sean Marks to talk about the future with the Nets, and now they're talking about Ben Simmons has some mental hurdles and physical hurdles to get over in order to play for the Nets next year. And it wasn't a surprise whatsoever that they held out Ben Simmons for Game 4. I really, I don't blame them whatsoever. I still wanted to see him play because, it's already been a few months of Ben Simmons being a Net, and we've only seen him in street clothes, which is annoying. So part of me wanted to see him play, but the logical part of me was like, nah, it makes no sense whatsoever. So they hold him out, but I still don't get why he couldn't play in Game 3. That still bothers me. I question whether he actually woke up with back soreness on Sunday, or if it was just kind of like we're down 3-0, so why even like risk it? So I don't know what the truth is with Ben Simmons, but it's honestly it's starting to piss me off. It really is. Like I've had a lot of patience with Ben Simmons. I've been very understanding about everything so far, but it's reached a point now where I really do believe, I genuinely believe, if Ben Simmons played in this series, it could have been a much different outcome. Like I'm not saying once again they would have won, but Jason Tatum at so many points in this series did whatever the hell he wanted. And the one guy on the Nets roster that could have at least done something to help stop Tatum was Ben Simmons. Nick Claxton does a pretty good job at times, but sometimes he does not look so great. But Ben Simmons at least would have had the best chance to stop Jason Tatum, or at least contain him in a way. So if they had Ben Simmons and had that 6'10 body and was able to go in transition with him and have him create open three-point looks for Seth Curry and Patty Mills and Kyrie and KD, it would have been a different series. I still think the Celtics win it all, but still, it's not a sweep if Ben Simmons is playing and healthy. It's just a shame what happened. You know, Ben was supposed to come back like 3 or 4 different times this year. It just never happened. So I just hope they get him right for next year. And I don't know if he'll 100% be a Nets next year. The Nets might be fed up with him already and try to trade him to somebody. But if you're another team out there, why would you even want Ben Simmons? It just seems like a massive headache that nobody wants to deal with. So as a Nets fan, I'm hoping he's back next year and healthy and ready to go mentally. I try to take the mental health stuff seriously. I get it. It's definitely something that should be taken seriously. But at the same time, as a Nets fan, I selfishly want to see him playing. So hopefully we get him back next year. I do think he'd be a good fit for this team. I really do. Like, he brings something to the table that this Nets team needs. And Ben Simmons is a good basketball player. Like, we have a very bad lasting memory of him in the Hawks series last year. But Ben Simmons is a good basketball player, and he would have helped a lot this series. So it's unfortunate, and it just seems like more crap is coming out every day about Ben and how the Nets were very frustrated with the entire situation with him this year, the last couple weeks. But it didn't matter because they got swept anyway. So really, I was hoping he'd be able to play in Game 1, then I was hoping for Game 2, then I was hoping for Game 3. And then once he did not suit up in Game 3, it was kind of just like whatever. And Ben Simmons actually was not on the bench tonight. He missed the game because of back soreness. I don't know how. Not even missed the game. Missed sitting on the bench because of back soreness. I don't know. Once again, I don't know how serious this is. I don't know if it. Like, I think Ben's actually injured. I'm not saying he's not, but you wonder how severe the back injury is, I think is the way I should word it. Because, you know, everyone's back hurts at some point, right? We get that. But, like, most guys are going to play through it in the playoffs, so you kind of wonder, like, how bad is this situation? I guess throwing Ben Simmons into his first game action in a playoff game was going to be a bad idea in the first place, so there was a plan to get him back in the second to last regular season game when they played. I'm trying to think who they played. Maybe the Cavs or the Knicks, something like that. But there was a plan to bring him back in the regular season. That never happened, of course, and you know, there were a few times I really thought he was coming back, and then it just never happened. So we got to wait till next October probably. So we'll find out what happens. But I do think, if healthy, Ben Simmons will be a very productive Brooklyn Nets, and hopefully Kyle Korver can help fix that jump shot a bit. Not saying he'll turn him into a three-point shooter, but at least a respectful mid-range shooter is the hope. But yeah, I mean, just to pretty much wrap it up, this is a big offseason for Brooklyn. It really is. Like, they have had a very weird just trajectory as a franchise the past few years, going from D'Angelo Russell being the franchise player and, you know, sprinkling in like Jared Allen and Spencer Dinwiddie and Karis LeVert, those type of guys, and Joe Harris, and going from like that to like mega superstars with Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, eventually James Harden, and kind of what we have now. It just feels weird. And I still hope Steve Nash is fired. You know, some report came out today that Steve Nash is going to be safe and that management doesn't think it's his fault and they don't want him to be a fallback guy. But at the same time, Steve Nash is not a good head coach. Like, I said the same exact thing about Joe Judge with the Giants like 4 months ago. It wasn't Joe Judge's fault that the Giants sucked this year, but you can tell Joe Judge was not a good head coach and was losing the locker room. And I kind of question the same thing with Steve Nash. Do guys even want to play for Steve Nash anymore? Do they take him seriously? Do the Nets players see how much better Udoka is compared to Nash and like take that guy seriously? Like, once again, I said this last video, I'm sure certain players, the superstars especially, like Kyrie and KD, love Nash because they probably walk all over him. But once again, what does Steve Nash bring to the table strategically to help them in games for the Brooklyn Nets? I don't know if it's anything. Like, I just think Steve Nash was brought here to handle personalities, and it worked out. Steve Nash was good at it. Steve Nash was put in a tough situation with the Kyrie vaccination questions, the James Harden situation, and he had to deal with a lot of crap this year from the media. So I give Steve Nash credit from that standpoint. He's a very nice guy, but just not cut out to be a head coach right now, especially in this situation for a team that has championship aspirations like the Brooklyn Nets. So I want to see a new head coach next year. I don't know who it's going to be, but we're going to find out eventually what's going to happen there. Hopefully in the next couple of days, we see that Steve Nash and the Brooklyn Nets, quote unquote, mutually agree to part ways. So we'll see what happens there. But anyway, congrats to Boston fans out there. As I always say, I have a few Boston fans in my life, and I got to hear it from them now. So that's a shame. But yeah, it's just a very disappointing season overall. I think, part of me is just happy it's over. Part of me is still sad, but part of me is happy it's over because it's been such a frustrating one. Like, I honestly think like the 12-70 Nets team was like more enjoyable than this because there were no expectations back then. Like, coming into this year, I had such high expectations to at least like get far in the playoffs and at least make the Eastern Conference Finals, but to be swept in the first round is not really what I envisioned. So it was tough. Your third best player was out in Ben Simmons. Your fifth best player, in my opinion, was out in Joe Harris. And we'll see about Joe Harris. That's another guy. Like, there's no guarantee he's back next year either. So there's a lot of questions the Nets have to answer this offseason. I'll make videos about the offseason coming up and what I want to see them do and who's in a contract year. We know Bruce Brown has a contract extension due possibly as well. He's in a contract year. So we'll find out what happens. A lot has to happen here. It's a pivotal offseason. The Nets need some things like some vocal leaders. They need some wing players, guys that can play defense, and, maybe some other guys that should not be on this team next year, like an Andre Drummond. Maybe Patty Mills does not make sense for this team going forward. We'll see, but we'll find out what happens there. And is Sean Marks even back? We'll see. I want to keep Sean Marks. I think he's done so much for this team. I'll admit that Marks had a bit of a flawed plan this year in terms of building this team because there were just way too many guards and it did not make sense from a roster building standpoint. But Sean Marks, in my opinion, is still a good GM, and I want to see what he can do. And I'm tired of like having Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving have input. Like, I just want to see Sean Marks do his thing because before they got here, Sean Marks was not missing. Like, before Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving got here, the only bad move Sean Marks ever made was like trading for Alan Crabb, who had a bad contract that ironically it's funny because I think Sean Marks gave Alan Crabb that contract and Portland matched it, and then they traded for Alan Crabb a year later. So it was Sean Marks' contract to begin with. But outside of that, Sean Marks did not really make a bad move as the Nets GM. He had so many more hits than misses. But then once the big personalities came in with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, that's when the questionable decision-making happened with Sean Marks. So I hope Sean Marks just kind of does his own thing, doesn't care what Durant has to say, doesn't care what Kyrie has to say, and just does his thing. And I really hope that's what happens. So they got to re-sign Kyrie. That's something that has to happen. I'm sure some Nets fans want to see him go, but I just do not see a scenario where Kyrie Irving is not a Brooklyn Net next year. I feel like for Kyrie, it's either he retires or he's with the Nets next year, and I don't think he's retiring. So I still believe Kyrie will be a Net next year. I'm sure he'll be on some type of like max contract or whatever. So we'll see what happens there. Anyway, once again, disappointing. It's just when you have Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving for an entire series and get swept, that's bad. And I saw a tweet today about Kevin Durant and Kyrie's careers in the first round, and like they are very good in the first round, so they've never faced this type of adversity before. But in a way, sometimes you have to reach rock bottom before things get better. And I had a conversation with my mom yesterday. She's not really a Nets fan in particular, but she knows I love the Nets, and she knows kind of a decent amount about sports. So I told her, like, I'm happy this is happening because A, it probably gets Steve Nash fired, and B, sometimes when you lose this badly, it really opens up people's eyes, and things that have to happen do happen. So, that could be a good thing. I have the same mindset with the Giants. When they started losing at the end of the season and Joe Judge was on the hot seat, I was happy because I thought Judge was not a good head coach. So I was like, all right, it sucks that my favorite football team's losing, but at least they're going to make the right moves, and they finally did. So with the Nets, it sucks they got swept, and it was painful, and game one is still going to haunt me for a while because I still envision Jason Tatum laying in the layup at the buzzer, but still, I mean, I think at the end of the day, this could end up being the best thing that could have happened for the Brooklyn Nets. You know, we wanted a championship coming into this year. Everything got derailed, whether it was vaccination, mandates, whether it was James Harden not being happy, Durant being injured, Harris being injured, Simmons being injured, Steve Nash turning into a horrendous head coach, all those type of things. So this wasn't the way it was supposed to go down. As a Nets fan and as the Nets organization, this was not supposed to be a 7 seed in the first place, but that's just what happened, and it is what it is. But hopefully what happened in this series is enough to open people's eyes around the organization and make this team better for next year, and hopefully they come back hungry. So we'll see what happens. Anyway, I can tell my voice is still gone from Saturday night, by the way. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the video. I don't know when the next Nets video will be. We'll do a season recap at some point, though, in the next week probably. And I'll talk to you guys next time.